I'm going to take you guys back on a little road trip to 2018. The times were great. The cancel culture was lively. We had an Air Force E6 technical sergeant, which posted this video to Facebook, and you can watch it right here.
Issues with my airmen and my NCOs that are lower ranking with me, but they're black females. And it me the off that they have no respect and constantly having an attitude. And what the is up with that? Like, I'm trying my best to hold my professionalism with them, but good God, that they have no respect whatsoever. Every time I talk to them, no ma'am. It's just like they're talking down to me. And I'm trying to tread lightly as a, higher ranking NCO, not to blow the up and start a fight club. But I'm over it. Why is that? Why is it that every time I encounter, my subordinates that are black females, they have a giant attitude? And it's not like I'm coming to them with a attitude. I don't. But every time I talk to them, it's like I'm just some stupid girl that it just doesn't even, what is that called? Like I don't even deserve to be talked to as a person. So educate.
Now it looks like she has stayed silent for the past 3 years and has not made a single statement. I've tried to follow up with this story, but officially a member of our community has decided to look for, I guess, her name or whatever, somehow come across this, and she's officially come out with a statement, and it's a long podcast, and we're going to break down a couple key moments of it so that you guys can understand where she's at now. Don't forget, we're almost to 100,000 subscribers. We're almost at 98,000 right now. You hitting that button really helps us out. Also, liking, commenting, things like that will also help this video as well, so we'd appreciate that. Now, during this time period of 2018, she was canceled. There was a lot of people against her, and literally the internet took this video by storm. Her career was over. That was known to be the case, and poof, into thin air, we never heard from Geraldine again. She goes on this podcast with the former chief of the U.S. Air Force, which was actually her boss, and knew very in-depth details about this, and started to make a podcast, which goes into various stories. If you want to check out that podcast in this entirety, you can definitely check that out. I'm going to leave that down in the description below, but the podcast is named Kicking It with KJ. The first one here is the fact that she really doesn't try and deny anything, and she doesn't give any excuses. Listen here.
Whatever I talk about is not, I just want to make sure that people understand it's not an excuse for that behavior. It's not. I totally own up to that stupidity on my part. But like you said, before all of that happened, I was already going through a really tough time. I've already been seeing mental health for 2 years before that, and I was going through a really, really hard divorce. And
while there is no excuse, and she says that, I mean, we have to add context in someone's personal life as well. She does talk about many of the struggles that she did face during this time.
The toxic stuff that was in my personal life was starting to seep into my work. And then I would slowly people would tell me, why are you so angry all the time? And to me, looking at my airmen, I was like, they're making so much basic mistakes that they should have at school. That was getting so frustrated to me.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what I focus on is I can't control my home life. Let me focus on what I can control right here. And so I was drilling on my airmen. I was unfair to them. It was also unfair to me to have to teach you how to boil an egg and not burn it.
Yeah.
Or, they're throwing each other under the bus left and right. Everyone was just for themselves. And that's not my Air Force. That is not how I grew up in the Air Force.
And she does take that accountability by saying that she was unfair to her airmen below her. At the same time, as somebody that has received people from basic pipeline training, where I'm like, don't they teach this in school? Over at the school where they're supposed to teach you these basic fundamentals. I could see how that could be a little frustrating, but probably not to this level, as it sounds like she had compounding issues. But I will kind of give you guys the TLDR of how this video even got out, where she talks about this, where essentially she made this Facebook video post only for private viewing and sent it to a group which was part of this Nellis dependent group, where
the girl definitely was like, this is not right. And I asked, I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, this is really, really racist. But we were having a conversation.
Right.
You know, I was being explained because I was completely ignorant and dumb that I didn't realize that video hurt people. But they were so patient with me to try to make me realize why I'm wrong. And then we ended that conversation. I left that conversation apologizing to them.
Yeah.
Thank you, right? I screwed up. And apparently the person in that group, you know, she thought that wasn't good enough, which I found out who it was, really pissed me off, because this person I would take care of. Like, she wasn't in our squadron, but I would offer to watch her kids because she was also a single parent. And like, I thought this person was my friend if she had a problem, and just, I'm the kind of person just say to my face and
wow.
whatever.
And this is where I have to redact my own statements, because I said, oh, this is a problem. Somebody took this and blasted this in my 2018 video. Like, we should have handled this at the lowest level, but I can't expect that from a military spouse. At least she did try and keep it private. But as many of you guys know, even if you post things on private now, that is no longer the case. It is public information, as anybody could share any direct messages, videos, whatever else you send. And this is kind of in the heat of that moment of 2018, when that was a big thing. When you're all talking about this, we talked about Marines United, with Marines sharing lewd photos of female Marines and posting that for public viewing, essentially. You got to think this is very much a learning lesson for our social media structure as it stands today. 3 years later, Geraldine is looking to change her name because the fact that it is easy for human resources departments to look up her social media, look up stories about her, and easily tell that this is the same exact person that was being reported on back in 2018. Now, I will say this interesting perspective with KJ, the host of this podcast, as her leader during this time period, really lets you into the insight of what happened during this time period. And Geraldine actually does shed some tears here by talking about her leadership and how they had her back.
I've always said I lucked out because my leadership, you know, stood by me and still took care of me. I'm sorry, now I'm crying.
That's okay. It's okay.
That's a very hard time for me because, you know, social media only knows me by that video. They don't know me. Aside from that, they don't know me as an NCO or an airman,
Or
and
person.
my leadership knew, or as a person.
Right.
But you guys knew, and you guys know that wasn't me.
And she actually does a formal apology on this podcast, which is very heartfelt. I will say that, like, throughout this entire thing, if you listen to it, it does sound very apologetic, very humbling. And there is at no point, from my listening point, that I can see that she has not taken this and learned from it. I cannot show that part of the podcast because there is copyright music that is being played exactly during it. I think to kind of set the mood, KJ set that there. But if you want to go watch that, it's at the 35-minute mark. And she does talk about what happened to her military career even after the fact from this backlash from this video, and essentially talks about how this really impacted her.
Not to feel all of those emotions all over again.
Well, of course not.
I lost my career. That was like losing a very big piece of me. I've always saw myself as being a chief. I am a military girl. I had an Air Force and I lost it. And that was the worst feeling I have ever felt. Because I worked so hard on my career. And now that is all I am ever going to be. Like, that's why I'm changing my name. because I cannot get a job. If HR, does a background check, and we all know people will look for you on social media.
Yeah, very true.
And now that is part of their hiring.
Yeah.
Nobody will hire me if they look me up and that is all they see. I will not get my second chance.
Okay.
And to wrap up this entire thing, I will say I like to go to the very end and recapture the stories as they come out and to get a full picture, because with Geraldine's story, this died at that her subordinates that were black females were not respecting her, and she had issues with that. And that was the last that we heard of this, and that people thought she should be canceled because of this. And now we're looking at this several years later. You're hearing her talk about this. Can somebody develop? Can somebody learn? Can somebody change to be a better understanding person? I mean, I do want to say it's kind of a shame, because the fact that like those micro instances where somebody says, hey, that is a little bit of the R word right there. You might want to not say that and rethink what you're saying. And you're like, okay, Geraldine could have very much been explained, could have maybe, had some more affirmation on it and had more people tell her. But I think the hordes of the internet coming after her were by no means the extent that she needed to get the picture or to know that what she said was very shitty. Obviously, I do not condone statements like this, but I do condone the fact that people should have a chance to grow and an opportunity to get to that point. We really should capture more stories like this to where people come out and talk about it, and maybe this will help put her in a new light. I don't think she should be ashamed for the rest of her life, but we're looking, 3 years down the line now where I think it's time to move on. What do you guys think about Geraldine's story? What do you think about what you heard about in 2018 versus what you're hearing from Geraldine today? Because I think these are two very different people, as I would say most of us, even myself, has changed since 2018. But as always, if you guys like what we do at this channel, you can always go down to patreon.com, down in the description, get some special perks and benefits. Also, on top of that, we have a YouTube membership below this video as well. Click on that, get some special perks and benefits here or on the main page. As always, if you guys have questions about this or anything else, you can always hit me up on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, or down in the comments below. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.